Welcome to Power Lunch Live. I'm Rhett Power, your host. It's good to be with you here today. I've got a fantastic conversation lined up today with Meghan Lynch. This is going to be fun, and I think it's a conversation that we've had on the program before, but I think it's something that is a pain point for a lot of small and medium enterprises, and that is brand strategy and how do you with all the stuff out there, all the platforms, all the new platforms just in the last year that have sort of taken social media and marketing by storm. There's a lot to talk about, and I think and it's worth the continued conversation. Anyway, the point of Power Lunch Live is to have today's thought leaders, best-selling authors, people doing amazing work that we can all learn from. That's the whole point. Now, we do that on LinkedIn Live. We do it on YouTube. We do it on Facebook, Twitter, something else probably I'm missing there. But anyway, we monitor those platforms during the program. And so if you ask your questions, we try to ask our guests the questions because they're the experts. So please do interact with us and send us your questions so that we can get to your answers. Anyway, I've got, like I said, I got Meghan Lynch on today. She's CEO of 6 Point Creative, which is a brand strategy agency that helps second stage companies break through their growth plateaus. She helps take on the big companies. She helps small companies take on the big companies. And she's actually was named the Enterprising Woman of the Year in 2019 and is an endurance runner as well. Just a couple little tidbits about Meghan. Meghan, welcome.
Thanks so much, Rhett. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, it was necessary. So we had to have you on. What are the fears that are holding back high potential companies from growth?
Yeah, it's a great question because I think that a lot of times people think about what are the roadblocks, what are the market roadblocks and things that are holding us back, but they're not always thinking about sometimes when we're holding ourselves back. And I think for the companies that we work with are usually under 100 employees. Probably most of them are family businesses, and they've gotten to a point where they now have something to lose, right? They have a reputation to lose. They're creating jobs for people, and nothing's more painful than having to, lay people off or make cuts. If it is a family business, there might be some legacy on the line. Either they're like a second generation trying to keep a legacy alive and kind of set it up next, or they have more and more people in the family kind of depending on this company. And so I think one of the big things that holds companies back is exactly that fear of loss, right? I can't really position ourselves for growth because it might not go right, and I can't afford to be the one who screws this up. There's too much on the line. And also these companies often have a really large concentration of their business in, let's say, a few long-term customers or one specific channel. So the idea of any kind of pivot in their brand, in their positioning, in their strategy, starts to feel really heavy because it's oh shoot, if that doesn't work and one of these clients or customers doesn't like this pivot or feels sidelined or left out, we're putting that relationship at risk. And there's this feeling of we kind of got to dance with the one that brung us, and we can't do anything to disrupt that, even if it means losing out on opportunities for growth.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all. I coach a couple of it's an interesting dynamic, right? Particularly the family-owned kind of business, that's a real fear, and it is I'm not going to be the one that drives this into the ground. It's not going to be me. Yeah. And that's a real dynamic. So talk about 6 Point Creative for a second and your work with these companies, because one of the challenges I always found as an entrepreneur and as a small, medium-sized company is I knew enough to be dangerous, enough to get myself in trouble, but keeping up with brand strategy and understanding the channels that you need to use, the right channels for your business, who to go to for help. Is it an internal decision? Do I bring people in-house to do it? Do I Do I hire that out with an agency? Talk about that a little bit and how you sort of get to a strategy that works without so much trial and experimentation. And I don't know how many tens of thousands of dollars I wasted on failed, trying this and trying that before we found the right mix. How do you do that? How do you get that right without the pain that usually it ensues?
Yeah, so I think that there's a few fundamental things that come into play. So one kind of like the step one kind of non-negotiable is like you have to get clear on where you're going. And you need to get clear on like, what is this vision? What is this North Star that we are following? Who is our target customer? And you need to know that customer inside and out. And so a lot of the work that we do with clients when we first started work with them is just kind of get all of the opportunity. Because honestly, like when you're working with entrepreneurial people, the issue is never that there's not enough opportunity. It's like there's almost like too much opportunity. Do we do this or do we do that? Everybody needs us, that they just see opportunity everywhere. And so what we try to do is really work with them to kind of look at their business plan and business strategy, look at their model, and then figure out how brand strategy can kind of complement what they're trying to achieve and accelerate what they're trying to achieve, and really start there so that we start kind of prioritizing like, okay, yes, there's 15 different opportunities, but what are going to be, your top one or two that if you nail these, they're going to make you more able to start working your way down the list as opposed to spreading yourself really thin on, trying to do everything. So, again, when we're working with these kind of like second stage scale up companies, my line is often like, what got you to where you are is saying yes. And what's going to get you to where you need to go is saying no. You really have to like do that discipline and that, have that power of no be an asset for you in the next stage of growth. It's like, it's just a different mindset, that's hard for people to kind of make that shift. But once they do it, they're like, oh my gosh, like this totally unlocks all this other stuff for us. So I think that that's kind of stage one. And then once you figured that out and you have answers to those questions, it's almost like everything else just starts falling in line. So, when we know where we're going, then we can talk to customers, whether it's existing customers about, what are the strengths of this company and kind of what is the DNA and why do you do business with them? And, even having conversations if they're talking about a market pivot or something like that. How would you feel about this? And how do we kind of like bring them closer to the company during a transition or time for change, so that it's not like, do we do this and lose these customers, or do we keep the customers and go after the opportunity? Like, we're confident that you can have both, and we know that our clients can get both. It's just about being good communicators and kind of strategically putting out message, making sure that they feel like they're brought along the decision every step of the way, that they are valued, that they are cared for. Anything that you would do in a basic relationship, right? It's just like, for some reason, we're often afraid to have those conversations because we're afraid of what somebody might say, but the conversation itself is really almost like the antidote to that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. What is the Solve for Why program that you have?
Yeah, so Solve for Why is a program that we developed, and it was something that I developed to kind of problem solve what I was going through as a second stage business owner. I had started this company, over a dozen years ago. We had some organic growth. We sort of hit a plateau. My business partners were looking at retiring. I had to figure out what our next stage was. And it just came to this point of like, I can't seem to articulate sort of what the vision is and where we're going, and I can't figure out how to make these decisions. So basically, I kind of almost like hired my team, and we started kind of like testing and seeing what worked to get us from where we were to where we needed to be. And as we were doing it, we were kind of like documenting what works and jettisoning what didn't. And then that became kind of like our beta test of Solve for Why. And once we kind of saw it work on ourselves, then we started kind of testing it with some clients, and then they started seeing value. And then we just kind of kept codifying it as we went. But the basic gist of it is that it's really first about focus that we talked about. We have some workshops that we run and some diagnostics that we do that really help to clarify that focus. And then it's about team alignment. So making sure that your customers are aligned, that your internal team is aligned, and making sure that everybody understands the strategy and the vision. And it's also about assembling that team that is going to execute that vision for you. So, you had talked about how do you, one of the biggest pain points our clients have is like, who do you, there's so much BS in the marketing world. It's like, how do you tell a good SEO person from a terrible SEO person? If I bring on a marketing person, how do I manage them and set them up for success? Do I spend time on TikTok, or is that ridiculous? Like all of these questions about like, where should I spend time? Who are the experts? So basically what we do is we take their strategy, and then our team is really brand strategists and project managers. Like that's where we excel, is helping people craft the strategy, helping manage the brand, and then helping just get stuff done. So basically what we do is we help to assemble the right fit team of execution professionals. So if they need SEO, we've got, SEO experts that they don't have to be wondering, like, is this person qualified for the job? We can kind of help them.
We have no idea.
Exactly. Yeah. And you don't buy these things often. It's not like, you get a lot of shots at this. So you just, the mistakes are expensive. And so we can kind of help them skip those mistakes and assemble a right fit team for their strategy. And then also walk with them to kind of oversee this team. And oftentimes it's a mix of some of their internal team, like they might have some internal capability to do some of this execution, and then they need a little bit of like external support, but we can kind of help them like manage this sort of like hybrid team that then executes this plan, so that you go from this like focus and then alignment, and then, it's just from that point on, just all about getting stuff done. And once you get into the execution mode, since you've done all the hard work up front, like you've figured out where we're going, you've figured out the who is going to get you there. And I'm just reading a book called Who Not How, and I think it's like 100%, like the right mindset of like, you don't need to learn social media. You just need somebody who's expert at it for what you do, and then you just need to hit the ground running. So that's really kind of what we're all about, is like accelerating that growth and helping people not waste time and money having circular conversations or making expensive mistakes, and hopefully just help them grow a little bit faster. I mean, as an entrepreneur, as you said, it's like once you've made those mistakes, if you can stop somebody, the pain of it and how it feels. And so if you can kind of save somebody else from doing the same thing, it's like a no-brainer. So if we can use our skills and expertise in that way and our network, it's awesome. It's really fun.
One of the things I was fascinated by in the way you just sort of describe the business and taking on the goliaths, I so self-identified with that description, because that was our whole thing. And how do you do that effectively? I mean, if you're taking on some of these companies, they have just endless budgets to be everywhere and to be in your face, really, and most small businesses don't. So
Yep.
How do you take them on effectively? I mean, how do you do that?
Yeah, so I think that there's basically like 3 elements to it. So one is the focus and really truly knowing your customer. Like insurgent brands, disruptor brands that can take on the big guys are ones who are really focused not on how do we beat them at, you're not going to beat Coke in getting everybody, but you can find a niche target audience who really, really wants, your beverage and prefers it to Coke, and you can get to know them so well that you can basically like outmaneuver the big guys by really surrounding your target audience with your brand. And if you're narrow enough, then it doesn't matter that the big guys have more money, because they're much less focused. They're taking, the butter on the toast and just spreading it super thin, where you can just kind of like really glop it glop it
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
And so that's one way. And then the other thing that I think is particularly hard for small, fast-growing businesses to get clarity and consistency. But honestly, like that is how big brands build brand strength. Like that is the secret. They are super clear about what they stand for, and they are hyper consistent about those colors, that message, their audience, their point of differentiation. Like they just like hit the same things over and over. It's like, you hear the jingles in your head. I've got a 5-year-old and he's like reciting jingles of companies. He loves Geico. It's like, it's not that they're just being so consistent. It's always, 15 minutes saves you 15% or more. Hyper focused, hyper clear, and hyper consistent. I'm sure the people who create those ads, for like the creatives in the world, it's kind of like, no, we're sick of it. We want to change it up. And for small companies and entrepreneurs, they're like, no, we've used that before. We need something fresh. And what we have to kind of counsel people on is like, no, you don't need something fresh. As soon as your team is just so sick of what they're saying, that's when it's just starting to make an impact on the customer. You need to keep hammering that. If it's the right message, be more consistent, more clear, just keep hitting it home. And that's the only way you can really start to break through the noise and start to make, just like a psychological impact on your buyer, on your customers, and help them connect with the brand in a meaningful way.
How do you know it's time to rebrand?
I think a lot of what we tend to hear as kind of like signs and symptoms is when there is this feeling of like, we have outgrown what the perception of us are. Like, we'll hear like, our customers don't understand everything that we do. One of the key phrases, if you find yourself saying we are a best kept secret in our industry, people often say it. Yeah, people often say it proudly. They're like, oh, we're a best kept secret. And they should say it proudly because it means that they've done the hard work of getting the operations in line. And that is no small feat, right? It's like getting the systems, getting the process, getting the consistency, getting the right people in the right seat. Like, it is great to be proud of that, but also like, who wants to be a secret? Like, what's the point of that? Let's let that out. And I think that one of the big things is that people often think of rebrand as like, okay, let's refresh the logo, or maybe we need to rename ourselves or things like that. And that's not really how we think about it. Sometimes that is an answer, but sometimes like a rebrand, again, is just like getting more clear, getting more specific, getting more targeted, getting more focused. I feel like a broken record sometimes, but it's like, that's it. Like that, it's not rocket science, but it's simple, but it's not easy. And I think that that's where people get tripped up. It's like, well, okay, yeah, I get it, focus, but I'm still not emotionally ready to let go of this, or I still can't quite, I'm often like, and I know this from my own brand. It's like, I've got, peers in brand strategy who I go to for my own brand because I can't read I'm inside the bottle, right? Like, I can't read the label on the outside. So I have to talk to them and say like, this is what I'm saying. Does this make it, is this translating at all? And they're like, no, it's not. Like, say it this way, or, this is what you're trying to convey. And so I think oftentimes people get kind of stuck inside and forget that they need to make it clear to people on the outside. They need to make it clear to their target audience, not just kind of like say what they think it is. And there's a real difference there. So I think, if you're a best kept secret, if you feel like your customers or your prospects don't fully understand what you do, it's time for a rebrand, but don't equate that to a logo upgrade. Like, that's, they're different. That is not the sum total of a rebrand. It's time to get clearer. It's time to make your message understood.
I'm always surprised as people think, well, it's about changing the slogan or the logo, right? That doesn't change the message, right? If your message hasn't been working and you're going to change it, the logo is not going to draw those customers in. I mean, it's or a new slogan is not going to draw those customers in. It's almost a culture change thing too, right? It's almost,
It
to me,
totally.
it goes even deeper than um, the marketing side of it. It goes
Yeah.
to what's not working in the model, what's not
Yep.
working in what you've been doing on the sales front. You know, it's a deeper question, because if you think you've got to rebrand, then you've got a culture problem, and
Yeah.
you've got some other systemic problems that you need to think about.
Yeah, that is that's such a good point. And I have some really talented culture consultants that we sometimes work with in tandem. You know, if we know that a company's trying to lead major change in their organization, I know that like just putting out a flashy marketing campaign is going to be immediately undermined if their people are not aligned, if they don't have the culture piece figured out. So oftentimes we'll kind of do like, you know, they'll work on the back of the house, we'll work on the front of the house, and then kind of bring it all together at the end for the launch. But yeah, I mean, your people, no matter what business you're in, people do business with people. And so if you don't have the right people, if you don't have the right culture, if you can't clearly articulate, I think that sometimes becomes like a cool extra value of brand, is that
Mm-hmm.
you have a business plan or you have an idea, but the brand, if you do a really powerful brand evolution, it helps that vision come to life in like an emotional gut level way for your internal team. So they're like, oh, I get it. Like, I get what you've been talking about. It never quite clicked before, but
Right.
once they get it, then they can be advocates for it. But it's that clarity is tough. It's really tough. And so that's where I think like a really powerful brand can kind of like just like kind of click everything into place for you.
Yeah. Absolutely. So what are the kind of in that same conversation, what are some of the big mistakes that we make in that rebranding?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think to just reiterate, like that we have kind of like an action bias as humans, so we'll often like jump to the solution. You know, we'll
Mm-hmm.
get inquiries from people who are like, oh, I need a new website, or yeah, I need a new logo, or that kind of thing. But they're very reluctant to kind of stop and move back and do the hard work first of getting that clarity. So we have one of our like mantras internally. I'm pretty sure it's stolen from the Navy SEALs. Is uh, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And so, you know, again, for entrepreneurs, they're like, you know, we got to move. There is opportunity here. And our process can be like frustratingly slow at first, you know, where we like really make them back up and get all of the building blocks in place, you know, whether it's, you know, even paying attention to the thing, you know, the culture piece that you mentioned or whatever, when they're like, no, we just need to get this message out. But if you do not kind of do things in the right order, in the right way, you jump to action and then it just falls flat and it becomes wasted energy. But what we see is like, if you take the time and you do that kind of slow, methodical work ahead of time, then all of a sudden you see that hockey stick on the coming out the other side. Like, you can execute way faster. You've got your team, they know what to do, they're clear, they've got their guidelines, they've got their budget, they've got their marching orders. All of a sudden now it's like that speed starts to come in, but it's not what you feel first. First, you feel like, oh my gosh, this is taking way too long. We're getting further away from where we are.
Right.
You know, and we have to kind of remind people to just sort of trust the process, which is hard, but like that is where the magic happens, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, you're right, and it also, you know, getting that message right, getting it right up front is a whole lot simpler. Maybe it's more painful, but it certainly the more you spend on it, on that message and what it is you're trying to achieve, right? That the better the outcomes. But that's hard. That's hard to tell people and to sort of show them, right? So you talk a little bit about second stage companies. Why are you focused on second stage companies?
I think that there's a few reasons. So one is just kind of like having gone through sort of initial startup stage and like personally having felt the pain of second stage. I feel like it's just like a life point in a company that I really relate to on a personal level. And again, it's kind of that like pay it forward piece of like, I know people help me get through that. So to me, to kind of like pay it forward and work with companies to help save them that time and that energy. And then the other thing too is, as part of kind of my growth and development as a CEO and a business owner, I spent a lot of time in peer groups and I found a ton of value in it. And also the more time I spent in them, the more I was like, oh, the vision I had of business prior to getting in those peer groups was like what you have in those like kind of surface networking events where it's like, how's business? Oh, business is great. Oh, no, we're doing so, I think like now you kind of see it in this like hustle culture of like everybody sort of Instagramming their way into like, things are great, everything's fabulous. But then you get a bunch of like CEOs in a room privately with the door closed and it's like, ooh, things are not great.
Yeah.
Oh, you have this problem? Oh, I have this problem. Well, I experienced that last year. And all of a sudden, it's just this like opening, that vulnerability enables so much faster information sharing and growth. And so I think I wanted to make 6 Point kind of a home for that vulnerability and like a safe place for companies just to kind of say like, we know that there's opportunity. We don't know how to access it. Just like help us and be safe space for them to kind of like be vulnerable, as opposed to, I think usually when you're buying marketing services, it's almost like buyer beware. Like if you say, I need a logo, somebody's going to sell you a logo, whether you really need it or not. And our whole approach is like, we have no stake in selling you any kind of like execution services. Like our only focus is helping you make the right decision for your business and for you and for the vision that you have for yourself, for your family, for your employees. And so I think that it puts us in this really unique place to be able to help companies in a way that I guess I had kind of seen it as like a gap in the marketplace of like, I just don't, I see these companies being served, but I don't see them being intentionally served with people who are like know how difficult this life stage is and how much these business leaders are juggling on the back end, because chances are if they're dealing with their brand and their marketing, they're also dealing with people problems and they're also dealing with operations issues and process issues and quality issues. It's not just like we're not the only right. Thing in their life. And I think to approach it and acknowledge that, I think becomes really powerful.
But it's the top of everybody's list. I mean, it really is, because it is a critical. It's critical to be there, out there now. It's critical to have a plan and how you're going to do that. Let me ask you this: what the last year we've seen things like TikTok and Clubhouse and these new platforms that are, I think people haven't figured out yet, or figured out where they fit. Somehow, I guess some people have. Some people have figured it out. Are those kind of platforms useful for a small, medium enterprise? And in which way, if they are?
Yeah, so I think they can be very useful to the right small business with the right customer who is on those platforms, if that makes sense. Like, I'm always very reluctant to give like a black and white answer to that, because I think that there's plenty of small businesses who could waste a lot of resources just because it's like the new flashy thing that they feel like like, I don't really understand it, so I feel this need to be on it, and they don't take the time to confirm or, you know, disconfirm that idea. They just like jump to it. Again, it's kind of that action bias. But we've also seen some really small companies that are finding great kind of blue ocean space on these emerging platforms because they are not yet so crowded. And also because, you know, we talked about challenging the goliaths, the big guys haven't figured them out either. And it's really hard for them to interact authentically on some of these platforms because they're such a corporate machine, whereas small brands can almost leverage their humanity and their kind of like, you know, just realness. I think to great advantage on some of those. Like we, you know, working with a company who it has some really cool products that are helping cancer patients manage the side effects of treatment. And they, you know, started testing out TikTok because a big piece of that is like kind of getting out this message to this very like niche group of people who are immediately undergoing cancer treatment. And they saw like their most engagement, the most, you know, like it really seemed like it was a great fit for them and a place that they could kind of really own the space and own their voice and connect in a really meaningful way with their target customers. So yeah, it really depends.
Do you think I guess the follow-up question for me on that is, how do you advise CEOs and leader and founders of these kind of companies on their own brand development? And is that as important as you know, building the brand of the company?
Yeah. Can I say it depends again? I
Sure,
think, you know, it's a lot of, again, I think this is the tipping point, you know, this kind of second stage point where a lot of companies where the owner founder kind of is the brand, they have to start making a decision about, you know, if I want to scale this thing, I can't be the brand, but also I have this power as the founder to kind of put a halo around this brand and again kind of give it its story. And so a lot of the work that we do is helping them find that right balance of like, what is their personal brand versus what is the company's brand, and how do you start separating those two in some way, but also help them like work together in sync so that, let's say they do decide to separate the brands a little bit and kind of build their own personal profile. Like I think of like Spanx and Sarah Blakely. She has like a really powerful personal brand and people do business with people. So that is really powerful for her to build her followings and her visibility, and it has a halo effect on Spanx. But she also has a team that, you know, Spanx has a brand and they can, you know, really build that on their side. And so the two are very symbiotic. And so I think that like helping them figure out how to do that strategically and thoughtfully and not just like, again, kind of reacting of like, ooh, I need to separate myself. We're scaling, you know, and then they separate too much, like I can't be the brand, so they just drop it and go away, and then it fails a little bit because the humanity of it is gone, and then they're like, see, I told you I could never leave, like this, you know, it just doesn't work without me, you know. They kind of like create this self-fulfilling cycle, as opposed to figuring out again like how to do it in a more systematic, intentional way that sets both up for success.
I mean, what would you say to a CEO or a founder that doesn't like the spotlight and doesn't want that?
Yeah.
Is does that work anymore?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, there's, again, I'm a big believer in like, there's multiple ways to solve the same problem. And there's plenty of examples of companies that have grown and succeeded, and the owner founder is like in the back, like they are not in the spotlight and they are not the brand, and the brand is still really powerful. I think that, again, maybe at that point, I still think having a human element to a company and a brand is just really important, but it might mean that it's not the owner the owner founder, maybe it's the culture and the people, and they're pushing their team forward and they become the brand. I think of like the Zappos brand, I think is a good example of that, where it's like their customer service becomes what is brand worthy, and their people are, they really push them forward and give them, build in systems that give them a lot of ability to be brand advocates for the company, to really kind of carry the weight of the brand on those interpersonal interactions. And, that was a conscious decision that Tony made when he was setting up that company. So
well, Tony had his own brand, but but yeah,
he has his own thing for sure. But I think like when I first heard of Zappos, I heard about their customer service. I had no idea who he almost like became famous because of how well their culture and worked. And
it was an intentional focus on that, though.
Exactly. Yeah.
So intentional, and and that's what gave him the. Yeah, you're right. I think you're right. That's probably what gave him the spotlight. Ultimately.
Yeah, people are like, who's doing this? What is this company that they're so different and so, they're just standing out. And then all of a sudden it was like, then they kind of created the culture piece as like its own separate brand itself of like how to teach other people how to do this. But yeah, so I think it's again, it's just kind of like, I'm a big believer, especially for companies that are closely held, like I have to be in service to the leadership vision for this company. And if they are clear on that, then, it's our job to figure out a way to execute it and to make that happen, with whatever constraints they put on it. And I think that like, it's really important that you have to do what's right for you. And if you hate the spotlight, then you're just not going to be good at it. It's just not going to be, it's not going to be an asset. So, but that doesn't mean that there's no asset or that's the only option. Like we'll find something else to leverage. Right. Clearly you don't get to second stage if you're not doing something right. So it's our job to figure out like, what is that thing that you've been doing so well that you haven't really fully leveraged into the world yet, and just help make that shine.
I think it's a great time when you get to that point to reevaluate things, right, and to rethink and refocus, because that's a tough stage, and it's a tough stage to get to the next one, and that's so I think you're on to something really powerful there. Meghan, thank you. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much, Rhett. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, and thank you for spending some time with us today here on Power Lunch Live. Got a great schedule coming up the rest of the week, and we'll be live tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern time. So we'll see you then. Thanks. Have a great day. And once again, thanks, Meghan, for being with us. How can people reach you?
We've actually set up a landing page for Power Lunch Live listeners. So our website is 6 Point Creative, and that's spelled out SIXPOINT creative.com. And you can just go to /PowerLunch. And there's ways to get in touch with me. If you think you might be a second stage company, there's a quiz that you can take there, get a customized report and some other tools and stuff that can be helpful. So
awesome. We'll put that link in the chat and LinkedIn and on the other parts of the platform, on the other platforms, so that people can reach that directly. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks.
We'll see you.